today, welcome to the Caitlin, Mitchell, and Bill podcast. I'm a gentleman, so it's always ladies first in my world. And I'm super, super happy to present a good friend of mine, Caitlin Murphy, who is the CEO and founder of Global Gateway Logistics in St. Louis. A terrific company, terrific freight forwarding company. I have known Caitlin for about a year or so. We've been doing some work together and really, really impressed with everything this young lady has done. So Caitlin, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you both for having me.
Our pleasure. So the obvious question for me, following on from last week when we talked about women in business and women in logistics, what are some of the challenges that you faced during your career? About being a woman in business, and we'll follow that up with being a woman in logistics.
Sure. Yeah. I love this topic too. I love that you guys are bringing light to it, not only just in general with women in the workforce, but of course with women in logistics. As everybody knows, it's predominantly male-oriented industry. So I'm happy anytime there's a platform just to educate people on what the current statistics are. To answer your first question on, what has it been like being a female and really being a female CEO in business, it's been incredibly interesting, I guess would be how I would describe it, because there's moments when I feel like I'm at an advantage because I'm a female CEO, right? Yeah. Not just because of my gender, but because of the qualities and characteristics that women bring to the workforce, regardless of the industry. We're most of the time, I would say, more empathetic than men. I don't want to say men aren't empathetic, but we really are. We approach a lot of issues at the companies that we work at with empathy, and there's just a little bit more of emotion to it in a good way. And then I also think that women are the best examples of multitaskers. And I can say that as a mother of two, a working mother of two, and a volunteer for several charity organizations and lots of other fun things doing on the side. You're, as a female, it's just ingrained in us to learn how to multitask as mothers, as partners. And then in the workforce, when we bring that and approach a particular career with that capability, oh my goodness. I mean, it's like logistics was made for women.
Yeah.
And so in some ways, I really think it's been an incredible advantage to be a female CEO in business. I will say though, too, of course, there's disadvantages all the time. I would say, to be completely transparent, I think one of the largest issues I've faced as a female CEO is access to capital. You all have probably read the statistics as well. It's an extremely low percentage of women that receive venture capital funds. And not just venture capital funds, but when I first started this company, I started it from the ground up with no capital backing. And so when we grew a lot faster than what we thought we were going to, we immediately said, oh my goodness, we've got to have a capital backing. And at that time, I went out to 4 different banks. I won't name them, but I went out to 4 different banks and a couple non-commercial opportunities. And everything looked right. I mean, we checked the boxes in every single scenario in terms of revenue and profit and cost. And I was told no every single time. And the answers were so different. It was, well, you're still too young of a company. Well, you need 2 years of tax returns. Well, you need this. And so what would really frustrate me is I was really I love to kind of be a part of startup communities, both here in St. Louis and across the country. And I was finding that a lot of men, and this is not just for logistics, this is overall industry, several industries, they were in the same startup path as I was, and they received funding, either from VCs or from banks or from other outside investors. And so it was really challenging. And part of me wondered, is it because I'm a female? Is it because I'm a young female compared to who typically walks in their door? And so, you know, that's one example I think of how it's been kind of a bit of a struggle. And then what's hilarious is you have no idea how many times males have walked into our business, had no idea what we did, were trying to sell me on something, whether it be insurance or, you know, phone services. And they've come to my desk and said, hi, I'm here to meet with Nick, who's my director of operations. Hi, I'm here to meet with the company owner, Nick. And okay. And sometimes I like, if I'm having a bad day, I just shoot them down right away and tell them you need to do more research. And other times, if I'm just like, I'm going to play with them a little bit, like a cat and mouse game, I'll say, oh yeah, the owner is right around the corner. You can go see him anytime. And, you know, so you kind of have to laugh off a lot of those cases because, you know, you can't take everything to heart. Otherwise, you would never progress. So I think those kind of sum up. I don't want to be too detailed with, you know, disadvantages of being a woman in business, but I would probably say access to capital and maybe slightly the respect aspect.
So eventually, were you able to get the capital from an external party?
No. So we continued to really just strategize our growth, and which was really difficult, Bill, because I had to say no to a lot of accounts that I knew that I could service from an operational standpoint, but from a capital standpoint, I didn't feel comfortable. It's almost that concept of, you know, if you're fishing, you don't want to go after this massive weight fish that's going to sink your boat, or break the line. And so that's kind of where we were. And so I really had to go through a lot of process of just trusting and knowing that, you know, we were on this journey for a purpose. And what's interesting is when I started this company, I had these false narratives in my head that I needed to have the largest clients to grow and to, you know, I really wanted to compete with Flexport. I still do because I think it's fascinating. I really do. I will say this. I think it's fascinating that Flexport has brought a lot of media attention to our industry. I will absolutely give them credit for those efforts. But I also think, wow, how great would it be if there was a female-owned freight forwarder that had the same service offering as Flexport. And, you know, so I kind of keep them up here like, man, okay, I think we can definitely get there. But so when I started, I thought overnight I had to become a Flexport, because all you ever read as well is the success. You read, wow, this is what they closed their capital in their first round, and it looks so easy. And the reality is I learned to really run the race as the tortoise instead of the hare. And at first I thought, especially in logistics, because it's a fast-paced industry, I thought I really had to be that hare. I had to run as fast as I could to beat everybody else. And, you know, I always say grace is like the best thing that has ever happened to me, because grace in my career has really taught me the value of slowing down and the impact that I can have with clients that truly need the logistics education. They need the understanding. They need that empathy sometimes, especially right now when they're paying double, triple what they would normally pay on a certain trade lane. Sometimes you just want to have a service provider understand it with you and say, I know this is awful. I can't believe the market conditions either. Here's what we can do to help. And I think if I was so focused in on that growth narrative of the hare, of going as fast as I can, I would never, and the team that I manage and direct would never be able to really learn the art of giving that valuable relationship to the customer.
That's fantastic, and it's been interesting, you know, in the conversations we've had over the months and weeks, that you've actually been able to take business away from Flexport, which is not the subject of today's conversation. Right. But you've had success taking business away from Flexport, and correct me if I'm wrong, But in both, I know of at least two instances where you took business away. Were they women-owned businesses?
Yes, they were. They were women-owned businesses, and I love that you kind of brought that to light one week. You said, "Is there any coincidence?" And really, I hope there is. I hope that female-owned companies feel comfortable at coming to a female CEO of a freight forwarding firm. And at the same time, you know, I've also had other companies that are male CEOs, and they're looking for that same comfort zone too. You know, everybody starts out in global trade there's a starting pad for everybody, a launch pad for everybody. And you have to build layers of education and years of experience to get to a point where you have a dynamic global supply chain. But, you know, why I started this company is because I've worked my entire career in male-run companies. And I felt so constrained to be able to provide customers with that strategy, with that education, with that knowledge, because at the end of the day, everything was so profit driven that the relationship drive in freight forwarding took a back seat to profit and bottom lines. And my argument was, you're looking at it the other way, like the cart before the horse. You're putting the profit before the relationship. But if you put the relationship before the profit, it has an equal benefit for both parties. And so, you know, that's really where we've seen phenomenal growth within our firm, is really only focusing on the level of relationships that we create and that we make. And, you know, I think, of course, if we had this incredible investment like a Flexport, absolutely, we could bring on a lot of larger firms and service them. But I'm a big believer that everything happens for a reason and timing. And, you know, there's a lot of wisdom we've gained in the first 4 years of Global Gateway. And so, you know, I look forward to the coming years and the more and more wisdom that we gain to be able to really approach high level, high volume customers.
Fantastic. So let's go backwards a little bit. You lived in China for how long?
So I lived in China, in Beijing, in 2007. I went to Peking University, and then I fell in love with it, and with China, with the culture, the history, the way of doing business, and I moved back in 2009.
So a couple of years of living in China. So that must have presented enormous challenges as well. And were the challenges different for a woman than they would be for a man?
Yes. I mean, it's a different culture as well. I love that culture without a doubt. But I also want to say to a lot of working women in the US, you know, you don't know how good you have it until you don't. And so, and that goes for countries and cultures all around the world, right? I mean, I think if you look at women in the workforce from a global perspective, it varies from country to country, both in terms of the amount of women that are in the workforce and the level, the C-suite executive levels that they have and the percentages. So, I mean, I know when I was in China, it was less of a gender and more of just a sheer number. So, for instance, and I totally failed. I'll be the first one to say, I think sometimes failure is the best way to succeed. And so when I moved to China to work, I thought, I'm going to live here the rest of my life, be this uber successful American businesswoman in China. And I failed flat on my face. I worked for an international marketing company. No one spoke English, so I had to fully rely on my Mandarin. And, you know, it was, I think I approached it in somewhat of what we call like the, what I would say the French, how they have that concept of the American ego, you know, that we have some ego. Honestly, it was like I had this ego going to China because at the time, there were so few people that I knew that were doing something like that in China. And so I remember thinking I was going to be super successful. And within the first 3 months, it was just a total failure. It was like everything was such a mess. I mean, there was no path to growth. There was no transparency. Some months you wouldn't even get paid, and it would be okay because in different countries, there's different workforce regulations and laws.
Yeah.
So you learn through a lot of these like failed expectations, not so much failure. And so it was through those failed expectations that I went home to my roommate one day in Beijing, and I said, and he was at university, he was an oil trader, and he said, Caitlin, I really think you need to look at logistics, because my degree was international business. And I said,
right.
Is. And you know, that'll come into play when I answer your next question specifically about women in logistics, but there's no education at a collegiate level surrounding global logistics. And so, but I was really intrigued. And so that's kind of how I started my career in logistics. I hopped back on a plane back to the US, and I wanted to run the gamut in logistics. I started in LTL and courier, and then moved up to truckload, and moved up to special equipment and rail, and then eventually got into international, where my passion lied.
So you kind of explained how you got into logistics. What were the challenges? Again, what were the challenges from a woman's perspective of getting into logistics? How seriously were people taking you? Somebody who had spent 2 years in China, somebody who had a degree in international business. How seriously were you being taken?
To answer the first part, you know, what was it like? And I still think it's like this today, Bill, in 2021. For entry-level positions, it is, for me, my experience was, it was wonderful as a female. A lot of the entry-level positions in logistics, the characteristics you needed to have and still need to have, I would say, is that being a multitasker, being able to, you know, work quickly under pressure, client communications. And I think women just excel in that. And so I actually, my first position in international logistics, my entire team was pretty much female. There was only one male.
Yep.
And I loved it. But see, that's where the buck stopped. There was no path of progression for women. There was no, okay, Caitlin, and I remember one time going to the powers that be at one of the companies I worked for and saying, you know, listen, I want a path to leadership. What does that look like here for me? Here's what I've proven in the past few years. Here's what I'd like to do. And I was told to go to documentation. Well, I think you should go to documentation. And so same as I did when I started my company, I called my husband and I said, do you care if I quit this job right now? I have nothing lined up, but I cannot stay here another minute. And he's very patient with me. And so of course he said yes. And the same thing at, you know, another company I worked for, I went in to ask for a raise and ask for, you know, what I felt I was due per our discussions. And his response to me was, well, your husband's an attorney. Why do you need to make more money? Oh. And this same situation.
I'm sorry to laugh. I mean, I'm laughing more out of embarrassment. And the year was 1920, what? 1922?
Yeah, right. More like 2017.
2017. So just 4 years ago. 4 years ago. So the thing that kind of propelled you into launching your own company was A, being told the pathway to leadership was through documentation, and B, that your husband was an attorney, and why did you need to be in a leadership position?
Yeah, I mean, it was really, Bill, the path to leadership was go down a rung on the ladder, actually, Caitlin. That's the path to leadership.
Okay.
And I looked at it and I thought, man, for myself and for any female, because I worked with so many females in logistics that are so incredible, but they were never given that confidence from a leadership level to strive for something more in their career in logistics. And so, you know, it was fueled both by wanting more for myself. I've always been very goal driven and I wanted more and I was hungry for more. And I knew that I could do this. And then also I wanted to do it for other women. I want women to have a path, not only of financial success, but career success and a long-lasting career in logistics. I think logistics is still an industry that some women fall into. They don't really come out of college saying, I want a job in logistics.
Yep.
But, you know, I've noticed that, and I've told you this, Bill, too, being a recruiter, we've talked a lot about the aspects that candidates need to have off the resume. And those are almost in some cases 10 times more important to me than what is on a resume.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, really the motto that I have. And so, you know, it's been an incredible journey, and you know, I really look forward to growing an apprenticeship program here at Global Gateway, both for men and women, men, and I would even say minorities as well, both male, female minorities. They deserve an opportunity and an entrance into this field of logistics, but one that is approached with empathy and understanding and education, and not one that immediately puts these restraints that the industry has around them or keeps them in a particular box, right? Now, because now we have technology to replace things that women and men, but mostly women, in my experience, had to take on, these entry-level positions of tracking and tracing and documentation. Well, guess what? Those were pretty much all held by women. So instead of, you know, now that there's technology that's really advancing a lot of these mundane processes, instead of eliminating those females' positions, how can you utilize each woman's individual characteristics to approach it in a different way?
Yep.
And so that's kind of where I lie with the future of females in freight forwarding. I think we've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah. Now we know for years and years and years and centuries probably, there has been significant gender bias. And, you know, Mitchell and I have talked and joked about, you know, the good old boys network, which doesn't always mean that it's 75-year-old. It's a club, you know, and it could be 25s and 30 somethings. Do you see that changing in logistics? Do you see women like yourself who've come through, and I've had the real pleasure of meeting a lot of very, very successful women in logistics. Do you see a time when there's going to be a good old girls club, and maybe, you know, that whole dynamic changes? Or because women are so empathetic and women are so practical, and certainly women seem to be a whole lot better when it comes to not wanting to take revenge. I think women, you know, are much better in that department as well. So do you see women just more collaboration between women? You know, is it a goal of yours to pursue business that's woman-owned business? I know you touched earlier and said that your business is not exclusively women-owned, but do you see value in kind of promoting yourself as a woman-owned business to other women-owned businesses?
It's interesting, Bill. I want to answer the first part of the question. Do I see it changing? Yes, I do. I was just added to a board of directors of a publicly traded company on the New York Stock Exchange because they sought out the values that a female leader in logistics can bring to the decision-making table. And it was incredibly, and I give them so much kudos, and I think it was a brilliant decision, and you're starting to see that amongst a lot of larger firms now. I think I do see it changing as long as companies, because it's a global effort. It's not just going to be here in the US, it's global effort. And ironically, actually, there are a lot of female leaders in Asia's freight forwarding firms, a lot. And so, you know, I would almost say we need to kind of take a page out of their book and figure out what are the training modules that they have for their companies, not just for women. And, you know, what does that look like for a US company? And so, you know, I think I do see it changing. It's always going to go slower than we want. But unless you have more women taking the same risks as men, and that's the big caveat right there is, you know, as women, we naturally are, you know, sort of, I don't like to put put these boundaries on women, but a lot of the times we are the ones that have to figure out the primary daycare for children if you're a working mother. A lot of women I've worked with in logistics are working mothers. And so, you know, what is that going to look like? We have to start tying in a lot of like really flexible work procedures and work times and days for that kind of meets women's needs. But at the same time, we as women leaders need to step up and say, okay, what actions are we going to take to help promote women? How are we going to educate women to know that this industry exists? That's a big aspect for me. And, you know, I do see it changing. It's just going to be probably a little bit slower than we'd want. And then to answer your second question, I think, you know, it's difficult because I almost feel like being a women-owned business, it's a catch-22, right? Because in some ways, you might have somebody say, you're a woman-owned business. That's amazing. Why don't you have that on your website? Why isn't that in your email signature? And my argument is always, you know, because that is not what defines me. That's not what defines my company. My goodness, you know, we are more than just a gender. And if all business and all industry led that way, where women were just shouting at customers and vendors that, hey, we're a female-owned company, I mean, at some point it'll fall on deaf ears, right? And being a woman-owned business and having that certification is great for a lot of different, you know, opportunities. For instance, the government contract opportunities. It's incredible to be a woman-owned business. You do receive preferential treatment. But in most industrial relations, I prefer to lead with, you know, this is who we are and we stand behind our service, not, you know, this is who we are. I'm a female-owned CEO. Listen to our service. I would rather it be, let me tell you about our service. By the way, my name's Caitlin. And, you know, it's from there they can say, wow, okay, you know, that's interesting. That I haven't really seen a lot of women CEOs in logistics. Well, great. Now you have an opportunity to know what it's like to work with one. So, you know, I think it's a catch-22. I think it can serve a decent purpose for particular contracts that I think are tougher to get, but definitely not necessarily what I want to be defined as.
Well, you know, I mean, getting to know you over the last year and getting to see your business flourish and getting to see you flourish has been, you know, delightful for me. Getting to see, you know, you getting various awards, you know, being nominated to go on the board of a publicly traded company. This is all fantastic. So it's people like you that are making a difference, and it's not just through talk, but it's through actions. And that's something we alluded to in last week's podcast. Is there has to be more action, and there needs to be more examples, right? There needs to be more Caitlins out there, and you know, to the extent that I can and Mitch can, you know, I think we're going to really enjoy bringing more female CEOs and female executives in logistics to the forefront. You know, you've got a voice. It's a voice that I think a lot of people needed to hear. And you know, if anybody looked at the Korn Ferry research that I was sharing last week, you know, people really need to be looking at women for all sorts of roles. And perhaps you know, women need to find more people, more mentors like you, right? I think, and I know that's something that you're pretty passionate about, and kind of helping others. And you talk about having an apprenticeship program, but you know, I think that women who could reach out to you and just to hear the story, it's a story that's worthy of an episode all on its own, because it's been a magnificent journey, but it's been I know it's been a very challenging journey. And you know, this has been fantastic. Mitchell, I'm sorry, I kind of I hogged the questions this week. Do you have any? You know, I think we've probably run over our time, but if you have anything you want to say to Caitlin.
You know, one thing is I love the story. I think it's a really interesting story, and I think that Bill and I should also get together and maybe have another our podcast and actually invite someone from a VC firm with you, and maybe you can ask them certain questions. So hopefully we'll be able to help you, being that I know a lot of people in that area of business. I'd be more than welcome to reach out and see if maybe we can get one with you together and hopefully help you, help grow. But I'm going to save some of these questions for next week. So if you are available, being that this is such an important topic, and your story is incredibly fascinating. I had no idea you lived overseas, so my questions kind of just changed. But there is one question that I'd like to ask. If people were interested in working with you or getting to know a little bit more about your company, how would they find you and how can they get a hold of you?
Sure. So our website is shipglobalgateway.com. And you can even have a fun chance to look at, I built a quote tool for quotations because I couldn't take the back and forth email quotations where you ask a customer 500 questions, they have to email you back 500. So I got together with our clients and I said, what tool would simplify your life? And so we built one. And so freight tech is a huge aspect of what I'm passionate about as well. But so that's all on our website. You can find more information on the company. But I love face-to-face, Zoom's now made it so easy. So you can reach me at Caitlin, Caitlin at shipglobalgateway.com. And also on LinkedIn as Caitlin Murphy. But yeah, I'd love to connect with anyone, whether they have questions or just would like some advice on wherever they're at in their career with logistics.
Great. And we will make sure that all that information is below. So you could just click the hyperlink and you guys can connect directly with Caitlin or take a look at their webpage. So, but this seems to be a big topic. So we're running out of time. We know you got a hard stop. So we thank you so much for joining us. And Bill, if you want to wrap this up for next week, we'll go from there.
Just again to say thank you, Caitlin. I know you're a very, very busy lady, and I really appreciate you. Mitch and I really appreciate you taking the time out today. And we would love to have you back next week. And it would be awesome if we could get somebody from a VC company. So I'm going to leave that one to Mitchell. But really looking forward to seeing you again on this same podcast next week.
Yes. Well, thank you both again for inviting me on and for even building this platform and this topic, which is so pertinent, and for all that you're doing for women in logistics just by hosting it.
Thank you. Have a great week.